I give and bequeath my ownership in the Negroes and people of color held by me to my dear wife. But it is my desire that none of them should be sold without his or her consent, or in the case of their misbehavior. The Last Will and Testament of James Madison, 1835.
Tears stream down my face as I sit here in this jail cell, fearful of what awaits me. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I'm 15 years old, and the law says I'm a slave, the property of Dolly Madison. This ain't the first time I felt fear. Why, even my first memory be covered in it. I recall my mother, Suki, and Ben, Becca, William, and me, along with the other slaves, following Master Madison's coffin to the grave. When the minister say, "Dust to dust," I could feel Mama shaking. Miss Madison thought we were crying for Master's death, but most cried for what the future might hold. In less than a month, that fear bore fruit. What they call a Negro trader come like a hawk among pigeons. Mrs. sold off her mother and her children, leaving her husband to grieve. As I grew, I listened well to whispers about the Madison debt. With anxious hearts, we watched Mistress Dolly and her son, Master Payne's troubles, knowing every debt might mean we were the paying price. But I still won't prepared when Mrs. sold Ben to Georgia. Mama's oldest sold away. My big brother gone. I would not be comforted. That winter, Mrs. moved to Washington, District of Columbia. She took my mother and me, along with Paul, who had been Master Madison's manservant. Soon enough, she wrote Master Payne to have him send my sister Becca along, no matter that she had to leave her husband and little one behind. In June, Master Payne arrived all in a flurry, talking without restraint about another large debt to pay and which slaves to pay it with. The house almost come to chaos. Then, Mrs. got the letter from my cousin Sarah at Montpelier.
My mistress, I don't like to send you bad news, but the condition of all our servants is very bad. The sheriff has taken us and says he will sell us at next court unless something is done before to prevent it. We are afraid we shall be bought by what are called Negro buyers and sent away from our husbands and wives. If we are obliged to be sold, perhaps you could get neighbors to buy us. We do not like to trouble you with it, but think, my dear mistress, what our sorrow must be. Your dutiful servant, Sarah.
The hard times didn't seem to want to never end. Right on top of that, the overseer wrote from Montpelier to say Brother William was on his deathbed. Grief overcame my mother, for she could not be at her son's side. Mrs. says she couldn't bear my mother's absence without her. My sister was sent back home, but around Christmas time, Master Payne sold her without a word. We was being pulled apart piece by piece. But then hope come creeping to my heart. Paul had long been set on getting his freedom, but Mistress Dolly didn't want to part with him. She rented him out for the money. Finally, he swayed Miss Dolly to sell him, and a man bought him with intention to let him earn his freedom. And Paul earned it. I saw him with my own eyes, walking as a free man. One day, A few months ago, Miss Dolly asked me to bring water to a guest. As I come with the tray, I hear Mrs. having pleasant conversation with a gentleman, as she said upon my entrance, but I knew he was a slave trader. I couldn't help thinking, who was next? What family was about to be torn apart this time? That evening, Mistress sent me to fetch water at the street pump. I spotted two men lurking about, so I took cover, and sure enough, I heard from their talk they's waiting for me. First Ben, then Becca, now me. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure they'd catch sound of it. I stole away as soon as I could, knowing tomorrow there'd be a price on my head and plenty of men eager to collect it. Hiding was one day a worry after another for me and for all those that hid me. I was still hiding when I hear Mistress Dolly sold my mother. My mother! Her maid since earliest days. My mother, the woman who provided for Mrs. as she grew weaker. My mother, who suffered as her children were sold to fill empty coffers and overcome debt. My mother, sold. My entire family cut off, scattered. The only thing that gave me hope was whispers that Paul and some others were making plans to help slaves escape north. A schooner called Pearl was gonna be our jewel to freedom. I determined to be on that boat. One evening, 77 of us secretly boarded and left Washington behind. With each passing moment, my fear fell away and freedom's hope rose in me. But the winds betrayed us. We were caught, forced back to Washington and jailed. I got word that Mrs. is set to sell me, so here I sit, remembering Ben sold down south, William dying without Mama near, my sister separated from her children, Mama sold away despite a lifetime of service, and all those other families broken up, sold like animals. I sit here with tears on my face and fear in my heart, knowing one day I will bring children into my condition, and like my mother and sister, I'll lose them too.
Hold on, just a little while longer. Ellen was not to stay a slave. Northern abolitionists came and bought her freedom. She was taken to Boston, and last I heard, she done married and had a child of her own. But I know she will always remember those she lost, and she will never forget those still enslaved. Hold on, just a little while longer. Everything's gonna be all right.